SCORE Northeast Wisconsin and WHBY are pleased to bring you Biz Talk, a chance for you to hear from entrepreneurs and professionals as they share their experiences. From starting to sustaining growth, learn the skills needed for your business to be successful. If you miss anything, you can catch the Biz Talk podcast at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. And now from the Myron Construction Studio, it's Biz Talk on WHBY.
Good morning and welcome to Biz Talk. I'm one of your hosts, Terry Finch, and joining me this week as co-host is Rick Sentz. How are you, Rick?
I'm doing well, Terry.
You still biking?
No, I hate to admit I'm not. It's the saddest three words in the English language. No biking today.
Well, we're going to have a day where you might be able to, or there's supposed to be one day, I think tomorrow, quite warm, but not enough for me. I've put it in the basement. Anyhow, this week we've got another great guest for you. Another example of some of the incredible businesses and services that you can find in this area that people don't always know as much about. And our guest this week is Megan Mulholland, who is the owner of Compass Communications LLC. Welcome to the show, Megan.
Thank you very much, Terry and Rick.
All right. So, Megan, to get started, we always like to start with an overview of you. What's your background? How did you get to where you are?
Okay. So I grew up in central Wisconsin, the youngest with three older brothers. And so I was quite the sports nut. And so what I actually really wanted to do was go to college and be a sports broadcaster. I figured I like to talk a lot, so why not get paid for it and, support my passion of covering sports. But then I realized that, sports activities are on the weekends and their nights. And I was like, well, maybe I'll pivot a little bit. So I graduated from UW-La Crosse and went into actually print journalism. After I did do radio for about a year and a half, radio news, and then went into print journalism, which is what brought me over here to the Fox Cities. I worked with the Post-Crescent for about 7 years as a business reporter, covering mostly unions and healthcare. But at the time, I could also write stories that were of interest to me. So that could have been travel or animals or women entrepreneurs. And while I was there, since I was covering healthcare, ThedaCare actually recruited me because they had one person that was doing government relations and he was also doing PR. And so he actually moved over into lobbying and spent more time in Madison and DC. And I took over all of the strategic communications for ThedaCare. Did that for 17 years. I actually launched Facebook when I was there, which my 21-year-old son kind of laughs because he thinks Facebook has been around forever. And then I actually, for about 6 years, spent time leading the marketing and communications at the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region. And at the same time, when I was there, I actually created Compass Communications. So I had worked at Compass part-time while also at the Community Foundation. But then last year, June, I decided to go full-time as an entrepreneur and left my steady gig and jumped all into Compass Communications.
So as we start talking about Compass Communications, let's start with first, what is public relations?
So public relations is really any way that a business or an organization would connect with the public. So that could be news releases, it's a whole plan. So social media, media relations, it could be community engagement. So going to chamber events. It's really finding ways to relate to the community. It could be knocking on doors, depending on what it is.
Go ahead, Rick.
And Megan, you've had an interesting background. How did you view the transition from working on deadlines for other people to now working your own deadlines when you made the switch over to working, going out on your own with your own shingle?
That's a great question. I still give myself deadlines, but yes, when I was a journalist, especially in newspaper, I knew either the deadline was that day or maybe the next day, which was then something I had to relate to my sources, or if they weren't able to make it, to find a source. So that kind of mentality of not procrastinating too long on stories or on projects really helped once I became my own business owner. I still do it a little old school. I have a written planner and I still use my Outlook, but I like to be visual. I like to see where I am, what I'm doing. I have some project management kind of activity or like spreadsheets and activities. So I know which client I'm working on and what's coming up and what meetings I need to do. And, and if there's a specific longer term project where I might have to focus on something, starting it now, but then I can finish it in a little bit. So honestly, being a journalist and a reporter working on that deadline has been beneficial because I know the importance of saying yes, focusing on it and getting it done, and then celebrating.
Okay. So you mentioned you were doing Compass Communications, I guess, kind of on the side as you were working with the community foundation. Why did you decide to have that business? What led you want to have a PR and communications firm?
Well, it's actually kind of twofold. PR was the broader, or strategic communications is kind of the broader umbrella for it. But what really started it was, so at ThedaCare, I am actually crisis trained, crisis communications and crisis response trained through FEMA and through the Center for Disaster Preparedness. Because healthcare, just like many government entities, police, fire, EMS, there's a lot of emergencies and crisis that they may have to respond to. It could be a 10-car pileup on 41. It could be a mass shooting. It could be the power outage or the outage of transcription. Could be, an employee theft. So I was constantly helping and guiding my leadership in different crisis responses and communications. So I actually brought that over to the Community Foundation and helped train them and create a crisis response plan. We trained on a tornado, and lo and behold, a few months later, we had a pandemic. And so we actually utilized the crisis training that I had provided and used that to respond not only to employees, but to the donors and to the nonprofits in the community of how we were going to support them during this pandemic. And when we shortly came out of the pandemic, one of my colleagues at ThedaCare in emergency management reached out and said that the pandemic really knocked a lot of leaders out of the ThedaCare, not just ThedaCare, healthcare in general, and even in EMS. They left the industry. And so there was a lot of new leaders, and they didn't know crisis response or they didn't know media relations. And so she asked me if I would do a training in Calumet County, but then also to other healthcare systems throughout the state. And I said, if I'm going to do that, I might as well create a company. And so really focusing on crisis communications and on media relations because of my background in media. And then I also coached, and why I did it. It was kind of going to be side training. And then the more people heard that there was a potential I would permanently or full-time hang a shingle, that they were like, well, when you do that, can you help me or can you help me? So it spiraled into a bigger gig, which became, my business.
Okay. And as part of your business, you focus on small and medium-sized businesses, nonprofits, and public entities. Why did you make that choice?
Because a lot of the bigger companies have a dedicated marketing and communications team who are doing great job, great work, and they'll often partner maybe with an agency to help with a annual report or something like that. But the small and medium-sized businesses may only have one person on staff, if they even have anybody. Same with the nonprofits. They might have a spectacular development team who really should focus on fundraising and could maybe use an assist on the marketing or the communication side. And so what I really do is, for one client, I'm actually their fractional chief marketing officer. So I start at the strategy and I do all the work and help them with their business development and making it connect with their marketing and communications. And then for other clients, I'm kind of like a social media manager and, posting and managing other social media or getting them connected with the media or chamber events. So it's kind of that whole aspect. And I feel in the small and medium-sized businesses, there's an opportunity to hire someone, but they don't need someone full-time. They just need kind of someone on the team to help them.
And we've had a number of people we've talked to over the last couple of years provide some of these fractional services for small businesses. How have you found that? What's the take up been? And is it something where you're going to see even more of this over time, where people effectively outsourcing something they're just not sure they can afford to do themselves?
It's been very interesting to basically outsource a senior leader, because that's what a chief marketing officer is an executive in the C-suite. And there was an article or a news story that came out shortly, probably like a week or so ago, that said that did a poll on how common the word fractional was used in the states and what states understood it and what states utilized it highly. And actually, Wisconsin was one where they often use the fractional insert title. It could be a fractional HR director or, vice president of HR. It could be a fractional chief finance officer or a fractional chief marketing officer like me. And so I think it's great that it could be an interim while they're hiring somebody so that there isn't a lag in that department or that area. Or they know that it's vital to have them as part of their team, but they may not be able to invest all the money or the time to hire someone at that salary level with the benefits. So the fractional people like myself and others can fill easily in. We have 10, 20, 30 years of experience, so we're very strategic, and that's where we focus. We focus more on the whole big picture and, the individual little things like the tactics.
Okay. And so what are, just summarize kind of, we've talked about some of them, but what does a client get from you when you come in to help them? What package are you providing them?
So I really kind of gear the package to the need. I help organizations and leaders really align their communication to their strategy. That could mean developing a whole communication plan based on something. They might have a campaign, they might have a groundbreaking, they might have a new hire, or they just simply want to raise awareness. And I'll craft messages. I can offer training on media relations, or I can manage special projects. A lot of times like an annual report, from beginning to end, I can manage all that. And then, as I said, I do a lot of training. So media relations, I will go into the C-suite and I will train someone, their whole executive team on media relations or crisis communications. I went into a local construction company with their 7 executives, and we walked through a crisis of an accident that resulted in a death on site at like a North Dakota facility. And then we watched the whole crisis and did interviews and everything. And then I kicked their CEO to Hawaii. And so that meant the C-suite had to mix it up and a different leader had to step up. They couldn't just look to the CEO to save them. So love going in and helping and train on that. So it's really honestly the need. I have clients that I've signed 1-year contract for, and I've got clients where I've signed a 3-month contract.
Okay. So, and I know in the third segment, we're going to talk more about crisis management, but I still remember from my experiences in multiple locations, the thick binder on how to manage crisis management when quite honestly, the phone call was usually the best way to get it done because it was always so different and complex. But what is it like for a manager of a smaller company, many of whom started by building this business up as the only employee of the business, and whether it be construction or making or servicing things, and now all of a sudden they've got to go out and communicate to the public. How do many of them make that adjustment?
So one of the things that I share is there's so many things that businesses can do for free. I mean, if they received an award or a new hire, there's, they could do a quick news release and share that with some of the business trade publications like Insight on Business or Business News. They can reach out to the media and say if there's for example, if there's a topic that they may be an expert on, like if you're in basement restoration, great time to just introduce yourself to the media would be right before tornadoes or, when basements might flood, things like that, because then they might be a resource for a story. And I think it's vital for social media. A lot of businesses tend to just post and they don't really think about what they're posting, but there really is a strategy behind social media posting. And that's where people are. People are reading news, connecting with people on LinkedIn. So it is vital. Even if you're a one-person show, like even me, I have a communications plan and a marketing strategy, and it doesn't have to be robust, but there's got to be something.
Great. We're at the point to take our first break. You're listening to Biz Talk with SCORE on WHBY. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to Biz Talk with SCORE on WHBY. I'm your co-host Rick Sense along with Terry Pinch this week, and we're having a great conversation with Megan Mulholland. But before we get back to Megan, I'd just like to take a minute to talk to you about SCORE Northeast Wisconsin. We serve an 18-county area in Northeast Wisconsin, plus the county of Menominee in Michigan. We have more than 50 volunteers, each an expert in their field, and offer entrepreneurs no-cost and confidential mentoring. Those areas of expertise include IT, social media, marketing, cash flow, accounting, strategic planning, workflow, human resources, retail best practices, and many others. In order to register for a no-cost confidential mentoring session, and or to learn more about SCORE Northeast Wisconsin, please visit our website at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. You can learn more about how the SCORE chapter can assist you with starting and or growing your business, and you can complete an application for a mentoring session. Simply complete the online form and submit it to SCORE. Within a few days, a SCORE mentor will be contacting you to set up a meeting. And remember, SCORE is no cost. It offers experts who can offer you assistance in many different areas. To get started, please visit our website at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. And Biz Talk with SCORE brings you expert advice, impactful stories, and real-world insights from experienced entrepreneurs and business leaders. You can catch that podcast and on your favorite podcatcher out there. So while you're out on your favorite pod handle, please remember to subscribe and like what you hear here on Biz Talk with SCORE, and listen and follow today. Again, available where all your podcasts are available right now, where you turn to listen to your favorites. Make sure we're one of them. So, Megan, I have to ask this. Having had a background in roles in the past where I was usually the person in an organization where, hey, Rick, we have this real emergency. We need you to sit down and wrap through what we're going to do, work through the problem. What advice would you give an organization that is facing a crisis before that split second, right before they're going to pick up the phone and make that call back to the media entity that's reached out to them to get a comment? What 2 or 3 things would you give as practical advice to that chairman or that CEO of an organization?
Well, besides the obvious, which is have preparation versus reacting. This is one reason why I pitch crisis preparation and crisis response and training. However, if you are not prepared or not trained, there's a couple tips that when the media calls you, you can call them back. And so the key would be preparation and not to have to put it all on one person's shoulder. This is where part of the crisis response planning would come into play. You'd have a team. So it should, even though the message may be coming from one person, there should be a team of people who can share their feedback, and provide input and insight on what you should and could communicate. A lot of times that could be legal, could be the CEO, definitely your communications or marketing person. They all have very different perspectives. And so there's a way to try to find mutual ground on that. A couple other things is to only share or comment on what you know. So don't assume, don't project, don't overpromise, because that's where the trouble happens. You may be wrong. You may not have all the information. So only share with exactly what you have. It's okay to say, I don't know, or I will find out, or we'll have an update again in another hour, 2, 3 hours. It's better to at least acknowledge and share versus being wrong, because then the backpedaling and the correcting can also really hurt a reputation. And when you're talking, also make sure that your staff know. They shouldn't be hearing this from the news media or seeing it on social media. They really, even if it's a quick text or an email or something to just make sure that everybody internally is aware before it actually becomes external.
What's the one thing you've run into that is very hard for you to undo in your role that you would advise people to just totally stay away from? Something that somebody who isn't really focusing on crises might say or do that they'll regret later.
Actually, the biggest thing I have seen lately is not speaking up at all. There have been major companies in a crisis, especially with social media, seconds, minutes, hours. You have to get ahead of the message. You have to respond. You have to acknowledge. You have to, share condolences or what's different or what happened. And if you wait too long, that people fill in the blanks. They get angry. They get frustrated. They leave. They take their business elsewhere. And it could be something like a business continuity where people are frustrated because they haven't heard from you and they want to know what's happening. They don't necessarily need to know the solution. They just need to hear from you. Or it could be, an employee who's been arrested or will be charged with something. They need to hear a response from the leadership on reassurance and confidence that business is going to continue. So it's really not necessarily, but it's easy enough to backtrack or to explain or say, I'm sorry, I didn't have all the information. But when you're stone cold silent, that silence says a lot.
We're going to take our second break. You're listening to Biz Talk with Score and WHBY, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Biz Talk. Thanks for joining us this weekend. We are talking to Megan Mulholland from Compass Communications LLC and talking about her role in helping small businesses, nonprofits, and public entities with both communications and crisis related topic of crisis management. Before we get back to Megan, I just want to mention one thing on education from SCORE. Talked about this before, but I think it's really important to mention again, is that when you go to our homepage and see the workshops and events tab, if you go in there, there's literally hundreds of different webinars that are available. Some are live. Far more were previously live or are now recorded in the archives, and they're really valuable to go and look through. However, SCORE's funding was eliminated in the federal budget this year, and so we've had to switch the way we raise money. And one of the things we do is there is a small fee for some of the national courses. So it might be $10 or $15 you have to pay for those, but those are for the national courses where they have some really good people coming in to talk and lead those courses. Most of the local or regional courses are still free, but you just have to look as you join in. But it is a way that we raise money for the organization, and just wanted to mention that. Again, it's score.org/Northeast Wisconsin, and it's where it's a tab at the top called workshops and events. Okay, so with that, we're going to turn back to Megan. Megan, just tell us some more about your role with value capture and how that happened.
Sure. So during my tenure, my time at ThedaCare, one of the things that ThedaCare really did quite a bit was process improvement within their own walls. So trying to improve the care and the processes for the staff, with the care for patients and lowering costs. And so when I went off on my own, I reached out to several former ThedaCare colleagues, and one of them worked at Value Capture. And they're similar. They were started by Paul O'Neill Sr., who was the former U.S. Treasury leader. And he, at the time, also ran Alcoa, which was the safest company in the world. And so this Value Capture is remote. They're based out of Pittsburgh, but pretty much all of us are remote. And they really partner with healthcare executives to design improvement systems and embed that learning culture into their environment. And I went with the intention of helping them share their clients' stories and successes. And they flipped the page on me and said, well, we could really use your help raising awareness on what we do and celebrating our client successes and all that. So then I joined Value Capture first as a consultant, leading their strategic communications and marketing. And then during one of my updates with the chief relationship officer, he called me their fractional chief marketing officer. And it's not often that I'm speechless, but I was, because I really went in with the intent of kind of staying behind the scenes, and they elevated me to an executive level. And so I joined their executive leadership meetings. We're going to do a strategic planning in person, so we're all going to join each other. That will be the first time I meet many of them in person, and they respect and really appreciate what I bring to the table. And it's been so wonderful and so flattering.
Okay, so that actually leads into the next topic then. Really, what is good communication management? What does it mean for a company?
Well, that's a great question. So it's really having a plan and thinking of all the different channels, all the different ways you need to communicate, not only with staff, your clients, your customers, the public, and then setting up a cadence and a way you can do that. I mean, it might be advertising through marketing, but then there's also your website, which is basically your front door to your business. Social media, like I said, there's media relations, there's community relations, going to the local chambers. And so it's creating that process, and the calendar, but then also the messages and the stories. Because you don't want to just go out there and blab and just talk about what you do and how great you are. You really need to show the impact and have the stories. And so it's really vital to pause, take time to listen to your clients or listen to your customers and be like, what are your needs? What are your concerns? How are we addressing it? And then use that when you communicate, instead of saying, we do this and kind of pump on your chest, but saying, this is how we've helped and this is how we've made a difference.
And when you work with other clients, as you first come in and start working with a small business or a nonprofit, do you often find that one of the biggest issues is that there are various ways of communicating, whether that be marketing, sales, PR, whatever, aren't integrated with each other?
What I've often found too is they're not really integrated with their major business plan or the strategic plan. If you have your 3 business goals or your strategies, your communications and marketing plan needs to ladder up and needs to support that. So if you're looking to grow in a certain region by 10%, your marketing shouldn't be focused on a completely different thing. It should be helping you to support your business strategy and your growth strategy. So it's one thing to just, again, slap a marketing and communications plan together, but it really needs to focus on what your ultimate goals are as a business and support it. And then there's an opportunity to test and trial, and if something doesn't work well, you can pivot and do something else. But you really have to have objectives and goals and strategy focused on the business itself.
And so as you're coming in and talking to people, even if you're not called the fractional chief marketing officer, you're really doing some of that work is trying to get their various processes and strategy and work methods integrated into one consistent approach for communication and marketing.
Correct.
Okay. So when you are dealing with these companies, what's their first reaction when you start to talk about it? Does it make sense to them, or is there a lot of training you need to do to work with them on it?
Answer is yes. So a lot of them are really surprised at how easy in a way things are. They forget they maybe took their marketing 101 class back in college, and they're really focused on the growing the business or maybe the sales aspect, and forget about how communications can support it all. So when I step back, because a lot of times businesses will focus on a tactic, get me on a podcast or I want to be on TV. But that's when you have to step back and say, well, what's your objective? What's your goal? Is that really the way to do it? I mean, in the old world, we used to say everyone wanted a brochure. It's like, what do you want a brochure for? Who are you targeting? What's your goal? And it's the same thing. So a lot of businesses come in and say, you're really great. You've got great media contacts. Can you get me on TV? And I'd be like, well, sure. But what are you going to talk about? What's your goal? What are you going to offer? Who else is going to join you? You don't just want the talking head on there. And so it really forces them to step back and think that it's not just a commodity. It's not like buying a cup of coffee. There's really a strategy behind marketing and communications.
Okay. And when is the right time for a business that's rapidly growing to start to consider to bring PR and communications in-house?
Really any time. But when you're getting a little frazzled, when you're, pause and look at that business plan and be like, how can I really grow in this market by 10%? And, one of the answers is you need to raise awareness. You need people to know who you are and what you offer. And one of the ways to do that is through marketing and communications. So it might be getting hit on the head when you're looking at your plan and you realize the gap, or it could be proactive and you're going to be doing something, whether it's an expansion, a growth, a new service line, and you need to promote it and announce it and celebrate it.
I'm going to switch to crisis management for a minute. What is the role of a communications team or public relations team during a crisis?
So one of the things that I bring to the table that's fairly unique to me is what is called incident command. So incident command was created in the 1970s in California after the wildfires, when they were responded to great by all the different fire departments and EMS and other first responders, but nobody knew who was running the show. So they were able to put out the fires, but then they admitted they were pointing fingers and they're like, okay, who's in charge? And so from that, they created incident command, which actually is a structure. So you have a specific role for every organization. So you have an incident leader. You might have someone in HR and finance, a community liaison, so someone who can reach out to like the Salvation Army or the Red Cross. And there's roles, there's literally job descriptions for those. And you're supposed to stay in your lane. You're supposed to focus on that. And there's also one for communications. So what this does is it shows that the communicator is there, should be one of the top 5, if not 3, in your team to respond, because they not only think about the clients and the customers, but like I said, internal, your staff. What do they need to know and how much do they need to know and when are they going to get the latest update? And also a lot of communicators come in with the perspective, a lot of times CEOs think they're right. They've got the ego. They want to share this. They want to do something. And the communicator can tell them pause, stop, time out. Is that really what we want to say and how we want to communicate and go forward? So it's vital that the communications and marketing person is thought of immediately as a team member during a crisis and not an afterthought.
So all what you're talking about, though, really requires coaching and training, and that's something else you do. So how do you approach that? You've just got a new client and you're going to start talking to them about crisis management and communications. What type of coaching and training do you start with, and how do you make that work successfully?
So there's kind of two trainings that go hand in hand with those communications. One is honestly creating a crisis response plan. And that's where I would come in and meet with the C-suite or any leaders, and we create the plan based on the roles that you have within the company, but then who can you pull in from the outside? Maybe it's a financial advisor, maybe it's a board member, but who could also be part of this team? And then we drill on it, and I leave the plan and my business card. And so if you need me, you can call me, and then we try to come back and revisit it annually. But then as part of that, I also do media training. So we walk through the crisis. What message would you actually write and share to the different audiences? And then we actually also will go on camera, and I will record you doing an interview with a reporter. And then we can, watch it back, and you can see if there's any things you do, like a tick, like do you rock, do you say a lot, and how were you delivering your message? And so it's that practice, too, of getting in front of a camera and giving the message. So those two often go hand in hand, but then there's a whole bunch of other trainings I give, from presentations to communicating with someone who believes in misinformation, disinformation, and social media. There's a whole bunch of different trainings I do.
Okay. And do you do both one-on-one coaching and groups, or is it more one of doing group training for that or that leadership team?
Majority is group, but I have also done one-on-one media training with new spokespeople, especially during the draft. There were some clients that were anticipating potentially getting media interviews or, being a source along with, the Chamber Visitors and Convention Bureau. So I helped them, one or two times, just kind of a one-on-one coaching, kind of like you would with a leadership coach. But then also I'll do a couple hours with the C-suite and do the whole training that way too.
Okay. And what do you enjoy the most of all the things you do in your organization, in your business? What's the most fun?
I mean, I love the storytelling aspect, which comes from, the media relations and getting someone, their story out there, whether it's through social media or actually sitting down and talking with a reporter. But I, to be honest, I kind of geek out with the crisis, and people laugh at me. They're like, we don't want to think about that. And that's where I point out that a lot of people have wills. They have an escape plan from their house to get out of the, fire. They have insurance for their car or their house. So they are prepared for a crisis. They're just not always prepared for it in their business. And so to be thought of as someone who can sit at that table and provide counsel and actually even step up and say, I disagree with you, and be respected for that, I love that. And my time here in the Fox Cities and all the different crises I've managed, I mean, it's not only something I say, it's actually something I've done. And I really, really like that. And I think it's a niche, that I can fill. And to have someone who actually is passionate about it, I think is great.
Okay. We are going to take our final break. You've been listening to Biz Talk with Score on WHBY, and we're going to be back with Megan Mulholland and talking about her business, Compass Communications, right after these messages. Talk to you soon. Welcome back to Biz Talk. I would like to thank our sponsors and donors. We couldn't present Biz Talk without their generous support. Thank you to Hailing & Associates. Hailing & Associates helps small businesses and individuals not just prepare tax returns, but plan for the future. Hailing & Associates, personal connection, positive results. Thank you to Johnson Financial Group. Wherever you are in your life or the life of your business, Johnson Financial Group works to help understand your goals and match the banking and wealth services needed to help you complete your mission. Thanks to the Business News for promoting our program in the biweekly business newspaper serving Northeast Wisconsin. The paper contains relevant and useful information about the business community in the region. We would like to recognize the David L. and Rita E. Nelson Fund within the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region for their generous donation to Biz Talk and Score Northeast Wisconsin. And thank you to New North, the Regional Marketing and Economic Development Corporation, for their promotion of Score. The New North facilitates economic growth and helps people in this region live their best lives. Now, as we turn back to Megan for the final time, Megan, to get started, could you let listeners know how they can find out more about Compass Communications and contact you?
Sure. So I am on Facebook and LinkedIn, so Compass Communications, LLC, on both Facebook and LinkedIn. I have a website called compasscommunicationsguide.com, and so you can go there and check things out. And my email is compasscoms, COMMS, at yahoo.com.
Okay. And Rick, I'll turn it over to you to run through the rest of the show. Megan, I had, growing up, I had my grandmother live with us, and it was always wonderful. She always had such wise things to say to me. And one of them that I remember almost daily was, Rick, you have one mouth and two ears. Do the math. Obviously she's trying to teach me the lessons of listening more than talking. And I noticed there's a blog out on your site talking about that. You want to just share with listeners some of your thoughts on that?
Sure. So a lot of times, especially since the pandemic, and even coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people may come up to you and they're sharing their story. It could be, frustration with their teenager, or it could be a stressful job. A lot of times we often respond with, I've been there too, or I can relate, or, you start sharing your story. And that's natural, but then what that really does is it may make them feel unseen because you're interrupting and you're really not listening. You're trying to make the story a little bit about yourself. So really, I did the blog because I wanted to remind people to, as you said, kind of keep your mouth shut and listen with your ears because you want to, and there's other ways you can do it too. You want to be fully present. So look at them, turn your body towards them, put your phones down. That really shows that you're listening and you're looking at them. Reflect their words. So if they say something, you can respond, you can validate them, oh, that's so horrible, or, that's frustrating, kind of acknowledge it. And it's okay if you're silent. Silence fills the gap. It allows you to be thinking. It lowers the pace and even the stress. And when they are done or they've shared their concern, instead of, again, flipping it on you, ask some questions. Tell me more, or, because it really shares the opportunity to continue the conversation and really shows that you're listening, that what they're telling you matters, and you really want to just be there for them, not necessarily provide a solution or your own side of the story.
How difficult is that for you to teach that to people, though? I know some people just are wired to kind of fill that void of silence in their mind, and they consider it a void as opposed to just letting the conversation grow. What kind of things do you advise people to do to kind of do the mental tricks to get that trained in their muscle memory?
A lot of it is the practicing. I mean, if you have to pinch your jacket or your shirt or something like that so that you focus on keeping, so that's as a reminder to keep your mouth shut. I think that's kind of the big thing is a lot of people interrupt and really listen, let them finish, wait for that pause, and then that's when you can respond. And you don't need to fill the holes, fill the gaps. And another trick is to repeat what they said. So if they say something, if you repeat it back, so I understand that you said, or I really feel bad that, Rick said this, that shows also that you're listening, and that's a trigger and a prompt for them to be like, okay, they're really paying attention, they want to know more, and they truly care.
So to kind of wrap up here as we work towards the end of the show here.
So you are listening to me.
Yes, I am. So just kind of looking through the idea of your experience, and you've had a vast array of great experiences in your career path. And what have you learned from starting the business, and what would you do differently today?
I would not have waited as long. I would have done this sooner. It was probably my biggest regret. I had the idea. I have the skill set. It was, I had the confidence, but I also had that inner doubt, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to do this completely on my own. I am a single parent, so this is the only income I rely on. So it wasn't necessarily that I didn't have a great business plan. It was, could I financially continue to support myself? One of the biggest things I've learned, two things. I have a spectacular group of friends and family that support me. They came straight out and told me they weren't going to let me fail. So they invite me to the table, whether it's chamber events, fundraisers, coffee meetings. They're making sure that I'm meeting people, getting out there, and even sending me cards or, things like that. But also you can't really do this on your own. I'm a solo entrepreneur, but I have a great group of friends and partners that are helping me. But the only thing I could really use might be a virtual assistant or someone to help with administration, because I get bogged down with, invoices and hours and writing thank you notes, things like that. But that's probably kind of the biggest things is you might be a solo entrepreneur, but you really aren't alone.
I have to ask, are you having fun?
I am having a lot of fun. Yes. A lot of fun.
I know I see a lot of posts out on LinkedIn and other places. You really do meet with a wide array of people and do keep that networking skill going. Why is that so important to you to keep in contact with the people that you're keeping in touch with?
Honestly, networking is probably my number one advice I would tell anybody to do in business, because you're learning about other people. When I have coffee, and I'm looking to fill my 2026 calendar, so if anybody wants to have coffee, I've got a lot of openings. But I mean, you learn about other businesses, you learn about the community, you learn about their concerns. There's ways to connect people. One of my clients, who's a police department, I met through a financial advisor. And I think that's great. And so you can't really focus too much on yourself. Again, it's that listening skill. You need to get out into the community, meet people. Even if you don't necessarily need their skills or their services, someone else you know might. And vice versa. They might not need your services, but they might know someone who does.
Okay, great, Megan. It's been really great to have you on the show. It's not something we've talked a lot about, but as a show about communications, I think you did a great job of telling people about why this is important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Terry and Rick, for inviting me on. It was great to talk with you.
Okay, so to everybody, you've been listening to Biz Talk with Score. You can find this show and many others on our website, or if you go to podcatchers everywhere, you will find the shows. This one will be out the next Wednesday, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. Go listen again. Go listen to some of the others. There's an incredible array out there. So thank you very much for listening to Biz Talk, and we'll talk to you again next week.